With the release of TPOT 19 finally giving us an insight into one's character and motivations, we've finally been given pieces of the overall puzzle surrounding the mystery of one's past. However, there's still a bigger mystery surrounding another certain algebrailian that's had me thinking for a while now. Arguably the most mysterious character in the history of the entire show, and someone who will most certainly have major plot relevance going forward, I'm of course talking about the mystery surrounding 3. 3 in general has just fascinated me for a while now, as he's notably had very few appearances throughout the entirety of Jack and Jellify's existence. Hell, I'd argue his biggest appearance was way back in X Finds Out His Value. He's one of the only numbers that have not appeared in any of the subscriber specials, at least physically, where most of the other algebrailians properly returned. With the exception of one, of course, because, And Jack and Jellify have continued to make sure 3's personality and character have been kept under wraps. But with the recent news that TPOT 20 will be focused on 1 and 3's backstory, I thought there's no better time than now to look back on everything we know about 3 and try to piece together who they are and what their significance could be in the overall story of TPOT. So, how should I go over this? Well, the theories I have surrounding 3 can be split into 2 main categories. A, 3 is evil, and B, 3 is a good guy. While the information we have on 3 seems to favor one of these theories over the other, I think there's a bit more to what we've been given. So I'm going to briefly recap everything we've seen on 3, then get into my theory on who 3 is. With that out of the way, let's get straight into everything we have on 3, which there isn't a lot of. 3 makes his first and one of 3 physical appearances in TPOT 11, where we see them close the door to a cell that they're presumably still locked into to this day. There's also this little crane illusion at the start of the episode that is obviously referencing 3. Then, in TPOT 14, we see a drawing of 3 that's been notably scribbled over on the fridge. In the next episode, TPOT 15, 3 makes 2 brief appearances as the host amidst all the timeline-changing chaos. We then jump to TPOT 19, where 3 is notably one of the 2 algebrailians absent from one's wall of crossed-out numbers, the other absent one being 2. And we later see 6 act surprised when Purple Face claims to have not seen anyone during his travels, specifically being shocked that he didn't find 3 that whole year he was alone. And that's it. Nope, I'm serious, that's all we got on the guy. He's not the most mysterious character in BFDI for nothing. So with everything we have on 3 out of the way, let's start trying to piece together 3 as a character. Looking back at what we've been given, there's a very strong case to be made that 3 is some sort of antagonist. Him being in a jail cell inside 4 could obviously be explained by him being an accomplice of 1 and was in prison just like 1 was, and would also explain why they weren't on the wall with the other crossed out numbers, as 3 would have been an ally of 1. All the imagery we've seen of being them isolated from the other numbers could also be because of his relationship with 1. And all the physical appearances of 3 have purposefully given off uneasy vibes. And finally, it would explain why 6 looks so distressed over Purple Face not finding 3, as 3's absence could potentially mean he escaped. This could also add to why 1 took 4 so she could reunite with her former partner. So it seems clear-cut, right? Everything we have points to 3 being some sort of villainous, unstable, and just overall dangerous character that needed to be imprisoned for everyone's safety. But personally, something about that just seems too obvious. Like I said, basically everything we've seen of 3 has pointed to them being some sort of big bad, but I just don't think that's where TPOT is heading with how much 1 has been set up as the season's main villain, and everything we've shown is just a red herring to make us believe 3 is a big bad guy. Just take a look at how 3 reacts to the prison door being open. They willingly choose to stay inside their cell and close the door, meaning that they probably went in there on their own and are actively choosing to be alone. Now, granted, maybe they were once in a similar situation to the Exiters, where 3's been in there for years and has just given up on escape. And I don't really have anything to definitively counter that, but I think it's more likely 3 just wants to be left alone for whatever reason. Also, something important we learned in TPOT 19 is that the other algebrailians are seemingly aware that 3's inside of 4, and they've clearly been in there for a while, likely just as long, if not longer, than 1's imprisonment. So, here's what I think happened. At some point, 1, 2, and 3 were close friends, since 2's also been seen in a lot of the imagery that contains 1 and 3. But 1's jealousy over 2's power resulted in her attempting to take it for herself. 3 actually went along with 1's plan, but eventually the pair were stopped by 4 and the other algebrailians. As punishment, the pair were separately imprisoned and would continuously make attempts to escape, as we hear a glimpse of one of 1's attempts to escape during TPOT 19's opening. Eventually, 1 would be sealed inside the moon, and 3 would give up on escaping and lock himself away in a cell. However, as the years went on and 1 continued to grow more bitter over being imprisoned, 3 slowly began to come to terms with what he did and realize what he did was wrong, eventually feeling he deserved to be where he was, hence explaining why he shut the cell door on himself. This would still line up with 6's reaction and the wall of crossed out numbers, as 6 still believes 3 is dangerous, and their lack of presence could mean he's somehow escaped to reunite with 1. And obviously 1 would have nothing against 3 if he was their former partner. Now, this doesn't explain why 2 isn't on the wall, but I think that could be either explained by A, there's another section of the moon we haven't seen purely dedicated to her hatred of 2, it is the moon after all, it's pretty big, or B, 2 still has sentimental value to 1 since they were friends at one point. Moving towards the events of TPOT 19, it's possible 1 knew that 3 was imprisoned inside of 4, and that's part of the reason she took him so he could reunite with her partner in crime, on top of getting some much needed revenge for what 4 did to her. Now that we've got a backstory established, what could 3's role be in the future? Well, I actually think we already have enough information to make a decently educated guess as to how 1 will be defeated, and what 3's role is in that defeat. Let's take a look at what we learned during this year's tour, where we learned a pretty interesting piece of information. X is the most powerful algebrailian. Now, just put a pin in that for a second because with this information, we can likely rule out the idea of 3 overpowering 1 or being some sort of secret trump card, especially now that she has the power of 3 numbers. If 1 does find 3 inside of 4, obviously they'd be excited to see each other again after all that time, but 3 would quickly realize how far gone 1 is, although he'd keep up an appearance to make 1 think he was just as angry as she was. So, how does this all tie into X? Well, I think the reason X is considered the most powerful algebrailian is because he has the power to multiply any of the other numbers together. And let's just use our thinking caps for this one. Tell me, dear viewer, what happens when a number is multiplied by 1? If you said anything along the lines of it stays the same number, then congrats! Not only do I have the comfort in knowing my viewers don't need immediate educational help, but you might have just predicted 1's defeat. I think at some point during the final episode, 3's going to betray 1 and make the ultimate sacrifice, having X forcefully multiply him and 1 together in order to trap her inside of him as a way to rectify his actions. In case you're confused why 1 would be sealed inside of 3 and not completely destroyed, let's take a look back at BFB 6 and 10, where this whole multiplication concept came from. Despite 4 being multiplied by 0, he wasn't erased from existence. His essence still existed inside Donut, albeit I don't know if 4 was aware he was in there. I think we can use the same logic for 1 and 3. 1 would be trapped inside of 3 with no way of getting out. Maybe she'd be more aware than 4 was, since she wasn't multiplied by 0, maybe not. As for what happens to 3 afterwards, that's anyone's guess. I'm sure 2 and 4's powers would be returned at some point, but I have no idea what would happen to 3 after that. He might die so he can get rid of 1 permanently, or lock himself up again. Who's to say? And that is my theory on 3. I'm pretty satisfied, all things considered. Like I said, we really don't have anything on who they are, and admittedly, a lot of this video is just pure speculation, but I like what I came up with, and just maybe I was able to predict another TPOT episode with this one. If you have any ideas of your own as to who 3 is, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to read them. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.